All right, so everybody's looking a little tired. All right, I know it's a lot of nerdy stuff, but just get over it. We're all nerds. All right, you're in good company. So my name's Marshall. We'll just go down the line. My name's Marshall. I've been mining since 2010. Currently, I'm working at Rhodium. So we've got 375 megawatts of immersion cooling running in Texas. Done all kinds of stuff. Met crazy people, many people on this panel. Have some commingled stories with people on this panel and their chosen device. But yeah, this panel will be pretty casual. We'll do Q&A at the end, probably maybe halfway through. But everybody will just kind of go down the line, say when they started, what your name is, where you're from, what you're currently doing. And then we'll just kind of go back through and we'll talk about your chosen machine and the good, the bad, the ugly of it. Whose data center maybe you burned down, and maybe how you got electrocuted one too many times. And yeah, so we'll just kick it off. Big G money, first up.
So I started a couple years after Marshall, 2012 to be exact. Tried to burn down my house, mining Bitcoin. It was awesome. And, you know, the rest is history. So.
What are you doing now?
Oh. Sorry, I've been up here 2 other times today. Still president and founder of HMTech, largest ASIC repair facility in the Western Hemisphere.
I'm Phil Salter. I'm CTO with Genesis Digital Assets. Yeah, I'm already looking
I thought
at
you were
this thing here.
CMO, Chief Mustache Officer. It's looking
that's
good.
Coming. That's coming. No, I mined a Bitcoin in 2011 on my GPU, but I only started mining properly 2014 when I joined the Genesis team, and we've been traveling around building data centers ever since. So I've seen a bunch of these devices here, and I'm looking at this, and my mind is just freezing back to the times back then. But we'll keep that for later. So.
I'm Braiins Snyder. I've been Bitcoin mining since 2013, so a little bit later than these guys for the most part here. Currently, I'm the CEO of Kaboomracks, and we're a mining marketplace. Specifically, we do globally, but primarily here in the U.S.
I'm Martin Caldera. I'm a vice president at Block Power Brokers. I've been mining since late 2011, early 2012, somewhere around there. Started mining with CPUs, and I was behind the curve and still trying to catch up.
I'm Greg Ohanessian. I'm the Chief Mining Officer at Greenwich Generation, and I got started probably around 2011, 2012 myself. I've owned quite a few of the models produced by Bitmain. First one would be the S1. I've built a number of data centers. I've started mining in my basement and quickly maxed out my electrical panel in my house, and then moved into my job. I had a tech company, so I maxed out my server room. Shortly after that, I rented a warehouse that was just dedicated only to mining, and just kind of kept growing from there. Now I work for a company that owns a power plant. So,
Are you ever truly a miner if the fire department hasn't come to your house, or the electrical company turned your stuff off, or the cops came because they thought you were growing weed?
Oh yeah, I had a good one like that. So my warehouse was just a plastic folding table and a chair, and the utility calls me up one day and they're going, "Hey, you're gonna blow up that electric meter." I'm like, "What do you mean?" So the neighbor calls me and he's like, "Hey, there's like police outside. They think you're growing weed or something in there. There's like ducks going out the windows and everything." And the meter's just like ready to blow up outside. They came in one day and just popped the thing off and just shoved the new one in because they got tired of waiting for me.
Yeah, you can hear tons of weird stories like that around. So we'll just go down and we'll tell stories about this. If you don't know what these are, there's a lot of different stories about this one. This is one of the very first ASICs from the now infamous Butterfly Labs. I personally had one of these that had when I got it delivered, it had a Coke stain on it. I guess somebody was just kicking it at Butterfly Labs and running it and left a nasty can of soda on it. Ran it for 2 weeks, sold it for double on eBay. So that was a nice win for me where everybody else almost got wrecked. So that's cool. This one, there's another OG miner who I will remain nameless, who is here today. This is an X1 from a company called Black Arrow. They called it X1 Prospero. This one had a pretty good habit of catching data centers on fire. So I, of course, would never have caught anything on fire. That's amateur hour, but, I do know other people who caught their data centers on fire with this very machine. But it was cool because it had an LCD screen, and you could do all kinds of cool stuff, and it had buttons that you could press. So,
Do you think that's the one that took down the Thailand farm?
no, Cowboys won in Thailand. That's the one sitting right next to Gerald. That was an interesting story. Go ahead.
So we had, in my opinion, the pleasure of running almost the full Spinduli's line, SP10, SP30, SP20, SP35, all of them, right? So around the same time, you had a lot of units like that would catch on fire, that would just stop running. You could just a litany of problems, right? So when we got Spinduli's, we're expecting the same thing, and they're a lot like micro BT units are today. You plug them in and you just forget about them, and they mined. It was like this golden age of mining. But unfortunately, like a lot of stuff in that era, you had 6 to 8 months was their lifespan. So we were sad to see them go, but they were definitely
Is
one of
that
the
why
icons.
you're so good at repairing machines now?
Yes.
Yeah. I've got the S4 here. This is actually an S4. The ones that I had experience with was the S4 Plus, but one of my guys threw out my pallet with collection of old hardware, so I never kept the S4 Plus. Yeah. No, the interesting thing about this thing is actually that they tried to not have it burn down mining farms. So they actually put in a temperature sensor and a protection to turn it off at, I think, like 105 degrees. However, the temperature sensor maxes out at 100 degrees. So it would go up to 100, it would stay there, then I think it would go to some negative number, like going over the top of the 100, and then it would explode. So
they tried.
They really try. Yeah, that's why they have so many numbers. Each one improves one thing, but only one thing. So yeah, I've got memories of going to Washington State to set up like 2,000 of these guys, and it was planned to be there for like 10 days to just oversee it, install the software, make sure the network works. We were there for 1.5 months, and yeah.
Who sold you those machines?
Oh, I'm not sure, Marshall. It was some kind of strange, slightly
wouldn't
shady
have been
entity.
me. Definitely not me.
That was also the first one when they changed the power supply, right, to that longer one. So, of course, when it blew, you couldn't just take a standard power supply and get it back up and running.
Yep.
Yeah, these were not ATX. Let's see if this...
There's a lot of screws on, though. If you want to change
God.
anything, you got to unscrew like 20 screws per layer. It's a 45-minute process to swap the power supply at least per unit.
Yeah, not just the power supply, but this one comes without
Anything.
the lid. It's got, you can't see it in the audience, but it's got like little screw holes everywhere. I think it's like 12 screws to open up this cover.
Yeah.
And we have lots of problems with the devices, so we talked to the guy that we were supposed to talk to for help, and he's like, yeah, these devices are quite stable, don't worry about it. Like, just one thing that you should think about, just one thing that you should remember. Once a month, you have to open up every single machine and tighten that screw, because the vibrations make it loose, and it connects to the power cable, and if it gets loose, the whole thing burns. So every device, you have to open it once a month.
So, anyways, this one's probably a little notorious. This is the Bitmain, the original S1. I believe it is the first shoebox design that anybody came up with. So this is definitely a very notorious and successful design. This guy only had 2 blades. I guess the best story I can give you from the S1, and I can't name names because I'm pretty sure I'm still under an NDA regarding the incident, but what I can tell you is we were in a data center in Phoenix, and we had I'd say about 150 kilowatts packed into about 4 racks. And the engineers were like, our system can handle this. It's nothing. We're fine, right, in terms of this density. Well, the one thing that the guys and the engineers forgot, and we ended up getting kicked out of there. I think we ran for about a month and a half. But we were backed up. And I don't know if you guys know old technology, tape backup drives. We were literally, our exhaust was venting into this guy's tape backup storage drive system that they had financial record archives for the last 20 years. And we were throwing about 120, 130 degree heat on these tapes. They were all destroyed. So that's, I think I've broken about 2 or 3 data centers, like professional data centers in my time. But yeah, these S1s destroyed about 20 years of financial records.
Yeah, Brian's catchphrase used to be, that sounds like a you problem. And then we'd just leave.
Yeah, no, but I mean, they still asked us to kindly to get the hell out. So,
So this is an S3 from Bitmain in front of me. This little thing has a lot of special memories. This was the first miner that caught fire to my house. Before then, I had some S1s playing, 20 kilowatts, but when I got these, I pushed it up to about 40 and melted all the wires going to the meter. So I was like, okay, beefed up the meter, beefed up the wiring, and then I melted the wires on the poles, set fire to the transformer, and it just kept going from there. So eventually, I got everything situated, stopped setting things on fire, and ran about 70 kilowatts of these things at my house. But these always hold a special place in my heart just because first time you start a fire with a miner, you just remember it.
I think probably by far the miner I've seen catch on fire the most would be the L3 Plus. People had a tendency to really want to overclock those machines because they, to be honest, they could overclock quite a bit. So from 504 megahash, you can crank these things up to 620. And when they burned hard. I mean, you would see power cables on fire. I saw flames shooting out of the back of a Z9 Mini. That was another one. They explode and they just shoot parts out the back when they blow up.
So that's a nice take. The other thing that I'd like everybody's input on is how you've seen. What's your favorite thing from the old days that has either gone away, or your favorite thing that is still there from the old machines to the new machines? Mine would be you still are at risk of catching stuff on fire. I love that. It's not a bug, it's a feature, and I hope they never take that away.
Wow. So I guess the one thing that I'm glad went away, and you guys can probably remember this too, right? So Bitmain didn't have this awesome website back in the day, and there were some other vendors that aren't even around anymore that were just random companies that existed over in Shenzhen or Hong Kong. So you would go on the forums, right? So you're on Bitcoin Talk, and this random guy that you've never met is like, hey, I've got ASICs for sale. And we're like, great, I want some. And he's like, all right, cool, wire me $5,000. I mean, why not,
That sounds
right?
normal.
Let's do it. I can recall having a lot of conversations with my wife. Like, you sent $5,000 to who? I don't know. What are they sending you? I don't know that either. But it's going to make some Bitcoin, so it's a good thing. So you had this anxiety, right? You wire the money overseas, and then 2, 3, 4 weeks later, you're like, oh my God, I just pissed away $5,000. What have I done? And then this nondescript, cardboard box shows up, and you're like, yeah, and you get to put shit together. So while it was painful during the waiting process, the anxiety was horrible. It was still cool to get it and it show up like that. So good times.
Yes, if you weren't in a sketchy escrow deal or group buy on Bitcoin Talk, you probably are not an OG miner.
Well, that was the most fun part, those group buys.
Yes. Yeah. Where's he getting delivered? Who's taking delivery?
So, what I always find strange is actually from the software side. Like when I first noticed this, that actually all miner software is based on open source router software, OpenWRT. I was like, what?
And it hasn't changed since 2014.
People mod their routers to have open source Linux firmware so they can add rules in a nice, okay, cool. Why is it on the miners? And why has that stayed there for ever? I'm just thinking right now, what's a miner that doesn't use OpenWRT? I'm thinking back to...
That isn't from 2014, right? Because the DWRT hasn't been updated since 2014.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't change. And also the custom firmwares that are out nowadays, they have this nice UI, and then you find the hidden button, and it goes back to the WRT interface anyway. It's ridiculous. Now I think it's I can think of maybe the InnoSilicon T2, the script ASIC. I think that one didn't have it. And I'm thinking that the MAT, Mining ASIC Technologies.
InnoSilicon ran on a Raspberry Pi on just a regular Unix distro. Yeah, that's right.
Well, didn't Avalon go and build their own controller, and then they kind of deviate away from that for a while?
Yeah, well, Canaan now puts AI chips on their controllers.
And I wish they went back to Raspberry Pis.
BTC Garden was another. BTC Garden? Yep.
That's fair.
BTC Garden, you ran off an old Raspberry Pi.
Well, I'll tell you one thing I definitely don't miss is the old style power supplies. Like this miner's a prime example. You always had an ATX and you had all those pins. I remember I used to have calluses, probably about centimeter thick. Like my entire fingers were just calluses so they could pop on and off the cables. And then of course, they would melt and burn onto them, and that's where 90% of the fires occurred. So, and the cabling was always just an absolute disaster and a mess. So, like my OCD, I'm like trying to wire cables, and then another group of cables over there is catching on fire. And if you've ever heard these ATX power supplies go off before, it sounds like gunshots. So, like a data center starts getting hot, it's 100 degrees inside, and all of a sudden you hear pop, 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 and everybody's diving to the ground. Like, who's pissed off today?
And there's nothing like that smell of burnt electronics.
Burned electronics, man. I don't think you ever get that. I'm sure that's in my lungs permanently. So,
I think I miss the LCDs on the miners. There was something about just walking down an aisle of S2s or S4s, and they're all showing their hash rates and lit up. It was just, it was impressive. I will say that over the years, Bitmain has kept the standard green and red lights as far as I can remember. I forgot if it's on the S1 or not.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you had green and red. The other thing with the LCDs that was fun, too, is you could actually get into the software and modify it. You'd be like, hey, we got a visitor today. You'd be like, hello, Bob. Like, whoever the hell's walking through a facility, or other choice words. Get back to work, from remote.
But I got to say, one thing that I miss about it is that whole, like, tinkering phase. Like, now it's just take it, plug it in, put the pool info in, and that's it. The days of, like, having to have USB hubs and running Raspberry Pis and figuring out how to get the
If you haven't
drivers
figured
to
out
work.
how to run 18 different devices off of one Raspberry Pi,
yeah.
you've not.
I was the grid seeds that he has on display. I had a whole rack full of those orbs, which started with a group buy and turned into
and then you could open them and voltage mod them
Oh,
and
of
make
course,
them go
yeah.
faster.
So once you couldn't mine Bitcoin with them anymore because they weren't efficient anymore, you shut that off. They're only using around 7 watts of electricity. Figured out you can go in there, you can put some resistors in, you can overclock that thing. I think it was 320 kilohash up to 550. So I had Raspberry Pis all over my house and every different electrical circuit I could find with USB hubs and probably 6, 7, 8, 10 of these things plugged into every single one of them.
I was going to say, didn't Avalon just recently switch away from that model? Like, I'm thinking all the way back, 821s, man. That was only a few years ago, right? I think I just had those in our warehouse a couple months ago going down to Venezuela somewhere, some poor sucker. But, yeah, Ethernet's definitely the way to go. I mean, I miss the tinkering too, but only a little.
Yeah, who
Those
misses
Raspberries
GPU mining Bitcoin? Nobody? Yeah, nobody. GPU mining sucks. It's so hard compared to this. When we got an S1, I didn't care if it caught on fire because at least I didn't have
GPU
to
mining
reset
Bitcoin
them.
was crazy because it was so much load on the core.
Yep.
Nowadays, GPU mining is all memory bound and it's kind of cold. But back then, it was just maximum core clock and just maximum heat. They would be roasting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think the whole reason I bought an S1 was because I was so busy always having problems with my GPU rigs that I was like, I just want one miner, one that works all the time. That I can just plug it in and it works.
You found one yet?
It was the S1. and I actually modified mine. I was overclocking it, of course, and I did the dual fan mod. I had these blue LED fans that I put on there, and it definitely helped. They didn't even have heat sinks on the front. I know the one that Tobias has on display has the heatsink mod. So you could do that, and you could add the second fan. That could really beef it up.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I don't know if there's going to be any Q&A or not. If you've got a question, I think they're going to try to get a microphone out there at some point so you guys can start kind of going over there. I've got the last question I'll kind of leave before I do that is where do you see the future of mining going over the next 5 years? If you think you know past 5 years, you're lying. I think personally, you'll see it more bleed into the power side. See power companies. I mean, there's a lot of conversations going on with power companies now. I don't think we're there yet, but we will be. I think the future is probably leveraging mobile mining data centers to rejuvenate old nascent industries. That's my take. I don't know what other people think.
So I think it's a huge topic, Marshall. There's so many different things. When we look at hardware, I think we're going to see a standardization of hardware, both from MicroBT and Bitmain. We've seen rack-mounted units starting to come out slowly, and I think that's going to push us to more of a traditional data center style usage. From a municipality standpoint, I think you're right. We're going to see revitalization. So anywhere where there's a substation on the face of the earth with a dead factory beside it is going to become a Bitcoin mine. If nothing else, we're innovators and we're go-getters as an industry. So when we find these places, we revitalize them. It's about cost. So I think both of those things will come to fruition.
Yeah, one thing we've directly seen is job markets around large industrial scales mining sites, and I know GDA could probably say the same thing, is, we're going to places where it used to be an old paper mill that employed the entire city, and now it's gone. It got shut down by the EPA, whatever. And we're teaching people who used to only have hard trade skills, high-tech skills, and that's probably what I like to see most in mining is more of that. Taking tradespeople and bringing them into the tech industry and giving them even more skills. I've gotten a lot of personal satisfaction out of that, and hopefully that continues.
I'm also thinking that that mining is going to go more together with the more traditional power industry, just like you were saying, Gerald. So specifically, I think that mining can play a really big role for pushing the development of renewable energies. Just because usually those wind farms and those solar farms are so far away that a big cost of the power is actually the transmission to get it to some city. So I can really see a future of Bitcoin mining being part of such an infrastructure project to more quickly recoup the investment of the renewables, and then to speed up the deployment process that way. So I'd love to see it grow together more, to get away from that stigma of Bitcoin mining being kind of a leech sucking the power wherever it's cheap. Because that's kind of true. It's also giving back, right? And we can offer this great what do you call it, a subtractive, controllable load. Wonderful words. And I think there's really some great chances, and they're already being used now to grow together that way. Looking forward to that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you guys. It's power companies are really going to be the ones coming into this. Saying that for a couple years now, it's kind of the inevitable area. Mobile data centers, load, especially when it comes to renewables, is shifting, right? So you have higher load utilization, for example, in North America during the winter season up north versus down south when you see those higher loads, down to the south. So the idea of being able to actually move that load bank from the north to the south dynamically and via truck and relatively easily is huge. It's also, in a way, a store of power, if you will, as a financial instrument for the power companies if they can leverage it. About one of the only ways I think that they're capable of combating major issues with renewables where they have an overproduction. I know right now I'm out in Arizona. We end up taking power from California because they end up overproducing at certain peaks. And California basically is giving the power away for free because they can't utilize it within their grid. It causes a lot of problems. So as renewables grow, I think we'll see Bitcoin mining grow with them.
I think everyone up here is pretty much spot on. I'd like to add that in addition to the power industry, other industries that have small power plants themselves, like oil and gas, I think they're going to start to play a part in this as low latency satellite internet is becoming more available. It just opens up doors for these basically remote cities that generate their own power to jump on the bandwagon of crypto and use it to their advantage.
Yeah, tell us about power and Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's right. There's all these areas where we saw what went on in Texas. I mean, there wasn't enough power to even light up homes. There's going to have to be some unity with providers and stabilization of the grid. I mean, we've got solar farms and wind farms. They're excess power that's not even being used, as you mentioned, that's just getting wasted. So I do think we can be very synergistic together. And I think one of the other big technologies that's really kind of on display here at this event today is, the evolution of immersion and liquid cooling technology, and how that's, it's grown a lot even in the traditional computer space to now you buy I'm a computer builder. I love it. And, you buy a new AMD processor and it doesn't even recommend you use an air cooler anymore. So I think everybody's starting to kind of realize that this technology is getting to that point where we really need to start to make that switch over. And, liquid cooling, immersion, there's obviously been a lot of evolution there for everybody. So I think that's good. And, that in combination with some, maybe a stranded natural gas site or something like that, it gives you the ability to put these things pretty much anywhere in the world, no matter what the climate is. It could be in the middle of a desert, and with an immersion tank and either a flare gas site or solar or a wind farm, you can operate anywhere.
Right on. All right, I think if there's some questions, we can do a short Q&A here.
Hi, questions, guys. Anybody
call
have
out.
questions?
I got a question for you, Tone. How do you look so good all the time? Also, I have a complaint. Tone took my money in a poker game 2 days ago. I'd like to be getting that back in a few weeks. Thank you.
You got to come back for poker. Miami poker's fun. So my question is, when it comes to machines, do you all have like a next generation machine that you're looking at that you are going to start using or recommending?
Yeah, I'm really psyched for the hydros that Bitmain's coming out with. So I got some of the early production samples and been playing around with those. And we have one of the full solutions coming soon. So I'm looking forward to playing with those and seeing how they perform.
Well, he stole what I was going to say. I'm happy to see the water cooling back. I had probably about 20 Bitmain C1s, which were the first water cooling from Bitmain, and I loved them. I think with the heat waves hitting the entire country, water cooling is going to be beneficial to some areas because it's a lot easier to just lower the temps on water cool. You can't really change the air coming into a facility that's outside.
Yeah, I'd tend to agree as well. I've actually got a question for you guys. And this one should resonate with you. What's the craziest thing in a facility you guys have done? Burned it down, done some other stuff. I think the craziest thing we ever did was we made it rain inside of a data center. Literally just rain inside the data center with puddles of water, and probably destroyed several $1 million in equipment.
I think my worst mistake was mixing a phase to a neutral. So I wound up with 2 legs on the PDU putting out 480 volts, one at 277. Let's just say about 66% of PSUs had popped capacitors.
God, I'm thinking. Yeah, I think the worst thing it's again these things here. God damn. No, I think the worst thing that we did is, like I was saying, like those things overheat, and then when they overheat, they explode, right? Probably the PSU or something. So the problem was we put them in containers, but we had both sides of the container, and the idea was to pull air from the bottom, and then the air go through the middle and then out the top. And there were 3 big fans mounted on the top. Sounds nice. Didn't work so great. It was okay. The problem was that those damn fans, they had an overheat protection, and they turned off on high heat. So at 80 degrees Celsius, they would turn off, and we reached that. So the fans turn off, so then the machines go completely haywire, and they start exploding. So we're watching this happen. I'm looking through, open the back of the container. I'm looking through the 2 aisles, and through this hell in the middle, air waving all over. The breaker's in the very back. The breaker's in the very back. There's nothing else to do. So I put on the hoodie, close the hoodie, run through the middle of it. The thing's exploding left and right, and just go do both fingers, brrrt, all the fuses. I think that was probably the most crazy moment. Yeah.
I think the most dangerous thing we did in China was we didn't use PDUs in the early days, just a bus bar, and you glue outlets to it. Look, it was cheap. Don't judge me, all right? It was cheap, and it worked. Just don't touch it. That's it.
So I was in a facility in China, and I saw one time they had open bus bars, but the workers would actually take these hooks and they would chuck them up to the bus bar to bring the power down per phase. And I'm just like, you guys are nuts! What the?
Yeah, OSHA's not a thing in China. It's awesome.
No. I mean, for sure. What's a worker casualty cost you in China? A couple $100, something like that.
I can't talk about that.
So one of the older facilities that we built back in the early days, it was a 3-story mill, and in the bottom of this mill was a chiller from 1951. Still had the date stamp on it. So during a deployment one day, I'm talking to who is now our lead engineer, and I'm like, "Hey man, I think we can get it going." And he looks at me, he's like, "Bro, no, don't do it." So I'm telling you, I think we can do it. So we start, and we actually got it running, which was super cool. So all this, probably 12-inch water mains that run through the building to an air handler that is larger than a house. So we get it all running. The water's flowing. We filled it up. It's producing cool air. We're excited. This is awesome. We go home one night. We come back the next day, and the entire basement is flooded because the pipes all broke. So we have 100,000 gallons of water in the basement, and we're 4 inches from the electrical room. So it was a nightmare process. We saved the facility, but lesson to be learned: listen to your engineer. Don't go on your own.
I think my craziest one was I remember. So I met these guys in Atlanta that had a data center, and they were looking to bring in customers. And I was like, "Oh, I'm a crypto miner." They didn't really understand yet, what we could do. So I went down there, met with the owners. They're like, "Yeah, come on in, bring all your miners in. Like, we'll set up the racks however you need them, whatever." I'm like, "No problem." So I drive down there in a box truck filled with miners, show up, unload everything, turn the whole place on, and go home, go to my hotel. Come back the next day, everybody's running around. There's alarms going off everywhere. Everything in the building is overheating. The whole room is overheating. And, of course, there's regular data center equipment in this room. So they've got guys running, like, video conferencing servers. And there was one other miner in the room, which was maybe comparable in size to me. But, I mean, it was like 95 degrees inside this data center. So they're all freaking out. Like, what are we going to do? And I'm like, do you guys need some help? Like, you can do some isolation around the racks and try to at least force the heat into the ceiling. So they hired some like professional data center company to come in that quoted them like $100,000 a rack. I was like, get these guys out of here. We go to Home Depot. We'll get some sheetrock. We got this covered. Don't worry about it. Like, you don't need those guys. And then, after that, they were like, "Hey, do you want to come work here?" I was like, "Sure, no problem."
All right, you have another question? All right, no, I got a question. We'll switch off. Unless anyone has a question, this has been awesome panel, actually. You guys are doing great. So I love the OSHA comment. So about an hour or two ago, I moderated the panel surrounding ESG. So being old school miners, what do you guys think about all this ESG regulation coming in on this industry?
So I'll preface what I'm going to say is this is my opinion, and this is most certainly not corporate opinion. This is me speaking. I think ESG is bullshit, and I think Bitcoin's worth boiling the fucking oceans. That's what I think.
It's a landmine, right? It's a landmine question. So I think by design, Bitcoiners look for the cheapest power and the most efficient use of our labor, right, to create Bitcoin. Naturally, that drives us to hydro zones, to renewable energy. I think that if the government really wanted to make impactful change, they might go against some larger corporations that actually use a significant amount of power and then do so in a way that's not environmentally friendly. Crazy thought.
That's actually nothing else that I can say on top of that.
There you go, Tone. What do you think of ESG, Tone? Please tell us, enlighten us. We'd love to know.
Yeah, I'm closer to your side there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. It's real ESG, I think, is what matters, right? You've got a lot of large Bitcoin mining companies who are like, we're green, we're ESG, and their facility, when you're driving to it, you're like, hey, what's that hill over there? Oh, it's a pile of coal. And then, you end up with the miners in your facility and you're like going to clean them and there's just coal dust in them. And you're like, yeah, this came from a green ESG facility. All right. Carbon offset credit.
My opinion, in short, is there's a lot bigger people to go after than the crypto industry. I think it's a lot of hype being the new kid in town that we're being picked on a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if you look at the electrical consumption of Bitcoin mining globally, it's pretty small in comparison to some other industries, and particularly industries that might be completely polluting the environment altogether with no regard. I mean, I've seen some of the things that go on in other parts of the world, and it's nothing like what we have going on in America. So. Yeah.
And, I think, and I'm not trying to kiss Marshall's ass here, but the better question would be, what are the positive impacts to the grid and to the environment that Bitcoin offers? So, the Windstone team and the rest of the operators in Texas, when they curtailed, was it a week and a half, 2 weeks ago? They put 1,000 meg back on the grid when it was under strain. So that did two things. One is it stopped rolling blackouts in Texas. Two is it prevented the power companies from refiring coal-fired or additional nat gas-fired power plants. So
you think Elizabeth Warren turned on her AC that day?
No, but I sent an email and said you're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, you guys have heard of this concept called Satoshi's second gift. So green energy is Satoshi's second gift, because some of the bigger innovations happening recently in green energy have happened because crypto miners actually have an incentive to create better solutions, whereas there's not really incentives otherwise to create green solutions other than maybe you want a tax break or something, right? So it's a little bit different. But my question to you guys, unless the audience wants to ask their own question, is if people, like, you guys have been in this space for a long time. I'm sure, and this kind of, in crypto sometimes you get jaded, especially as the bull market goes up and down and up and down. And sometimes even when the bull market is up, there's a lot of jokers in the room and there's a lot of noise. How do you recommend to people to try to, for one, silence some of that noise, and then maybe things you do to make sure that you still stay passionate and keep pushing forward? Because I've seen a lot of people in crypto burn out, and then they just, they're so rich now that they stop contributing. And I think that's really harmful, as a lot of big brains have stopped contributing, and I want them to still continue.
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. So I could tell you I'm personally pretty jaded. That's why I became a miner in the first place. I don't want customers, generally don't like people. Like, I'm just trying to chill, make some Bitcoins, just hang out, The reality is it's now easier to spot the LARPs in the industry than ever before. It's real easy to see who's going to be here next year versus who's not. As time progresses, there's going to be plenty of red flags that you'll be able to identify. And if anybody's trying to sell you something, you really got to think about, okay, why? And what's their benefit? And if they're not willing to be straight up with you about it, it's a really easy red flag, right? So as far as that goes, it's easier more than ever to identify losers and rejects and people who are just dumb. Like, there's no other way to say it, just not smart people. That's my take, at least. And now everybody's here has enough experience, made enough Bitcoin to, not have to really deal with people they don't want to deal with. Most people, I think, on this panel would say we're just trying to build cool stuff with cool people and fuck the rest. And that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, that's sage advice. So while I am a Bitcoin maximalist, I do think some other projects do have utility. But with that being said, if someone is trying to take your Bitcoin in exchange for a shitcoin, there's a reason. They want to hold the Bitcoin and leave you holding the bag. So stack your Bitcoins and ignore the rest.
The best advice I ever got was just buy Bitcoin and then just forget that you have Bitcoin, and then just come back in 5 years and you'll be a lot happier.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like everybody always wants to invest in Bitcoin when it's right at that peak point. Hey, they call you up. I just invested in Bitcoin. And
buy
it's like,
high,
why?
sell low, baby. That's how you do it.
Right now,
or miners
is the time that you should be out there buying miners, buying crypto, whatever it is, because this is, part of this natural cycle that we've all seen many times go and come. So
yeah. Also with trading, it's maybe you can increase your dollars, but it's really hard to actually increase the number of Bitcoins that you have. They always seem to just go away.
Absolutely. I look at everything as a Bitcoin transaction. Is it going to net me more Bitcoin?
Yeah. No, so the way that I handle these things and cut through the noise and not get jaded after the years of doing the mining is I think
grow
it's just
a
most
bitchin'
important.
mustache.
Well, that's just to haze the others, Yeah, no. So I think the most important thing is to keep having fun at it, right? It's probably the same with every job. Like, I could be working in, construction or something. If I hate the job, I shouldn't stay there, right? If I hate it and I do it anyway, or I'm in it only to make money and I hate it and I'm just doing it through it anyway, I won't survive for a long time. So I like to take the time sometimes, play around with these things, research some new technology, read up on something, even if I probably won't make instant money from it, and just kind of, take my time. And when I'm talking to people and it's too pushy and it's like, oh, this should be too fast and it's got to be this way, then probably there's something that's probably the right time to take a step back.
Yeah, and you can see, like, all of us are very passionate in this industry, and at some point in time, we've all kind of crossed paths in our journey here. And I think it's good to see, people that actually care, stick around, help others, build the community, get rid of the riffraff that kind of drift their way in when things are up. And, really the people that actually are passionate about this stay.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I was going to say. Is it's really about passion. The people that burned out or went away. There's a lot of people that come into Bitcoin because they're like, hey, I want to make a quick buck, right? I mean, those people disappear every single bear market. They're not here now. probably already run away. I've seen so many people who are just like, oh, this is a quick buck. It's a new thing. It's the internet. I'm going to make my millions. I'm going to make my billions. But, you come in and have an actual real conversation with them, and they don't even understand the technology that they're behind. And so I think one of the defining differences with everybody who is on this panel is, I know for a fact, you guys all have passion. We all believe in the technology. We believe.
You don't know me, Bri.
Yeah. I don't know you, Marshall. All right. But that's my point. And also I have to say, your advice on forget about it for 5 years is the best advice, because I gave my sister a Bitcoin for Christmas one year at I don't remember. It was like $500, $800. And I just told her, I was like, forget you have it, forget about it, don't do anything with it. Well, she remodeled her kitchen and she took a European vacation. She still has half a BTC. Life lessons.
I got to thank Marshall, because what he said actually brought me back to the early days of Bitcoin talk, where people would just post stuff for sale, and it was like unbelievably fake. And people would list scammer, post a picture of this with your name, do you accept escrow? And it just brought back a lot of good memories of the good old days. That being said, I'd tell people not to get discouraged on these dips. I mean, it's a pattern. Look at GPU miners. This is I think the probably second time where they've gone just sky high and then just crashed down to worth almost nothing. And it's going to happen again. There's going to be these repeating cycles across crypto. It's you can almost make yourself rich just by looking at the ups and downs, knowing when to buy. And you don't have to buy coins. You could invest in hardware. The hardware fluctuates in price just as much as the coins do, depending what they mine. So I'd say don't get discouraged and keep investing.
Yeah, if you're wondering when to buy machines, it's getting better and better every day.
Yeah, I keep hearing a lot are out for sale. All right, so I have a question that actually just hinted on. So we heard stories. Marshall, you said you actually got the butterfly miner delivered.
Yeah,
you used
boy.
it for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And you sold it at a profit. Now, what about any horror stories on the financial side? Like, what if those miners were not delivered? What would have happened to you from your wife? So have you guys ever bought a whole truck of miners, and then the moment you sent the Bitcoin, you're like, oh shit, maybe I should not have done that, and it was not delivered? So any of those stories from the past?
Oh yeah.
And do you still think about it, how much Bitcoin you would still have if that deal went through?
So yeah, for sure. Like a lot of folks, I got caught up in the Butterfly Labs deal, so I bought a bunch of Monarchs, which at the time the average hash rate across the ASIC space, I think it was 150, maybe 200 gigahash per machine. So Butterfly Labs comes out and they're like, we're going to make a 600 gigahash. I'm like, holy shit, I'm going to be rich, right? I can't wait. I want all those, right? And so immediately I order them. I'm stoked. I can't wait to get this thing. And then I start reading other threads. Should have read first, and everybody's like, "Oh, they're never going to deliver." I'm like, "You guys are crazy. Of course they're going to deliver." Other people got their jalapenos. Right, exactly. They all came in. They're going to do it. So come to find out, not only did they never deliver, I wound up getting a partial refund, which was a little salt in the wound. But at one of their Butterfly Labs team meetings, right? So instead of saying, "Hey, how can we satisfy these customers? How can we help the community?" No. Their CEO bought these foam stadium signs that were pitchforks and torches that said "When miner, when ship," and they made fun of all the customers. So when the SEC wound up raiding their office, they had all this shit and it got posted online, and it was a complete nightmare. So worst story ever.
How many of you guys remember the GAW miner days? Everybody, I had a friend who literally was like, I'm buying everything. He put 90% of the crypto he had into buying these hashlets. Well, they actually make the GAW. I had that red GAW miner box, which was just somebody else's miner with their logo on it. But he's like, you got a whole data center full of miners, and it's one guy with a picture of one rack. And then everybody's investing all their money in it. This guy lost probably 90% of the crypto he had when the whole thing went up. And he kept telling me, you got to do it, you got to do it. I'm like, listen, if it's not my miner in my hand, in my possession, It's not my miner. I don't even know that it exists. So, you always want to be weary, know who you're investing with, know the company you're buying from has actually made something before. These are common sense things.
Actually, I think the gold miners were the S4. They rebranded them. I'm pretty sure.
So, funny story about Gall miners. I actually responded to a post on Bitcoin Talk to buy used equipment, and I ended up going to this place. I forgot, it was Mississippi, I think, or Alabama. I forgot where it was now. And I ended up buying a whole bunch of those miners, Zeus miners, Falcon miners, the red, the white, the black ones, a whole bunch of fans, electrical panels, all kinds of stuff. I loaded up a box truck, and about halfway home, I was like, that kind of picture looked familiar. And the person I met was like, I've seen him before. So I started going through, and it was the second in charge guy, not the main guy.
So you got everything from their data center?
I got a lot from their data center. I got pallets of EVGA, PSUs, all kinds of stuff.
I'm pretty sure I still have the t-shirt at home.
A lot of stuff very cheap, and I didn't realize who they were or who he was until I was almost back to Houston.
So I'm not sure if you guys ever got any. Do you guys remember the KNC Jupiters?
Yes.
So that's when I got good at having to repair shit. So these things came in a box. Yeah, I think CoinDad's got a couple in the museum. They're these like box things. Well, let me tell you, they're cubes, right? And basically, when we unboxed them, they were confetti. So whatever they did to secure these things inside of that box was no good. It was like a little plastic screw, and UPS and FedEx is always so gentle with stuff, and it just shook around and basically confettified. So you open these things, every single one, it was like 99% destroyed equipment. And after 2 weeks of working on these things, I think we'd fixed like 4 or 5. And, we were lucky because we hedged our bet. We had actually ordered half in Jupiters, half in S2s. So fortunately, the Bitmain S2s arrived intact, at least partially, but they had the same problem too.
Those disintegrated in shipping.
Just the self-destruction during shipping.
Then they did the steel plate mod to try to keep the hash cards in place.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's like old school right there. It's like you guys are triggering a bunch of bad memories now. So
I think those are really funny, you guys. And I like to hear people who have been here for a long time. I do want you to talk about one topic that I feel like has not been touched on, but I feel like people would trust your analysis on it, especially because you've been around for a while, especially you, Marshall, just because I know where you live and do business. But CBDCs, right? So these central bank digital currencies that are coming up right now. Do you have anything that you want to share about them? Warn the audience. Yeah, give the mic to Marshall.
CBDCs and all central bank currencies in general are going to zero. If you're of any other opinion, you're a fucking moron and you don't deserve to be here.
Yep. So it's hard to add on to that, but I think the beautiful thing about the Bitcoin ledger, right, is that it's fully transparent. So a lot of politicians initially were talking about how it's we're laundering money with it, we're evading sanctions that Russia has, and money's sliding over.
Easy to do that.
Right. So when we look at central bank digital currencies, what the government's realized is that Bitcoin is really easy to track. So with CBDCs, if cash and credit cards are eliminated, the ledger is public. So literally every dollar that is in existence is instantly tracked the second that you spend it or move it. So it's a terrible idea. Not a fan.
Okay, so I was at a private conference at JP Morgan 6 months ago. The chairman of the IMF was there. I was not allowed to take videos of this. I asked several times. The words, "I like CBDCs because it allows me to turn off your money if I don't like what you say," came out of that motherfucker's mouth. If that's not good enough reason why you should be here, I don't know any other way to tell you that. That came out of the chairman of the IMF's mouth. That's it. It's like that meme. They are who we thought they were. It's exactly that. They're a bunch of fucking crooks. Everybody's circle jerking each other. They're all on the same team. They're here to kill you and kill themselves with their financial terrorism, and that's it.
Right, but Bitcoin is also completely public. I think with all these analysis firms and all the KYC data on the exchanges nowadays, which is accessible to like FBI or whatever, aren't we maybe heading the same direction with Bitcoin too? Like, I'm still a big believer in the privacy coins.
Marshall can't turn off your Bitcoin, though.
Yeah, but they're regulating the exchanges because that's where they know they can control you.
Then we stop using fiat.
So I think one interesting take I've realized over the last little while is that the largest advocates and people helping out the crypto industry right now are the actual federal governments because of how poorly they're managing our funds. So yeah, I mean, in short, why in the world would you trust the same people who are mismanaging fiat currency with your digital assets? So I mean, it's the definition of insanity, right? And it's like trying the same thing over and over and again and expecting a different result. Do we really think the Fed is going to do any better than what innovation in our industry has done?
I think I can sum it up by read the original Bitcoin Satoshi paper about decentralization, getting the control out of the government. I don't know if anyone's ever read it, but it's worth a good read.
Yeah, I mean, look, we all know the government is horribly inefficient at doing anything, very wasteful. So, I do think there's something to be said about, I think all of us could agree that we got into crypto because we like the financial freedom that it gave us. Nothing irritated me more than going to a bank and being like, I want to wire this much money to China. Why? What is it for? Do you know this vendor? Yes, it's my money. I want to send it where I want to send it. Why do I have to answer these questions? So, I still enjoy that freedom that crypto gives us. And, while it is traceable, we all know that. We all can transact our lives, with that being known. We don't need somebody else controlling it or telling us, no, you can't do this, or you were bad. We're going to take that away from you.
Anyway, guys, I want to thank y'all for your time and sharing your stories here. Thanks for everybody kind of listening to us old dogs banter about silly stuff here. Thanks for the conference organizers. The conference has been great so far. And thanks for everybody coming out and just getting nerdy with us. Thanks so much.